The faucet dripped in the kitchen like a metronome, each drop echoing through the dark house. Margaret Walsh sat in her robe at the table, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed on the window where the night pressed against the glass. At 67, she carried herself with quiet discipline, but tonight her chest was tight, her stomach a knot. Upstairs, the faint thrum of water pipes stirred. Brandon, her son-in-law, had started his morning shower. He always sang under the spray, smug and tuneless, a man convinced the world was his. She hated that sound. Margaret closed her eyes and remembered the voice she'd overheard hours earlier. Not the careless whispers of a man cheating or the sighs of a husband with secrets. No, this had been calculated, precise, spoken into a phone like instructions for a heist. Her confusion is convincing. Tomorrow we'll make it official. After that, she's gone. The words had been delivered with such confidence that for a moment Margaret had doubted her own ears. But she had not imagined them. She was too old for self-delusion, and too seasoned to mistake malice for care. The air in the kitchen seemed colder now. She thought of Sarah, her only daughter, asleep 2 rooms away, oblivious. Sarah had always defended Brandon, his ambition, his charisma, the way he carried himself in a room. Margaret had wanted to believe him too. She had swallowed her irritation when he cut her off mid-sentence, ignored her unease when his hand lingered too long on her shoulder in mock sympathy. But tonight stripped away any remaining doubt. She wasn't sick. She wasn't losing her mind. She was prey. The clock ticked past 5:55 a.m. The pipes above groaned louder, then steadied. The rhythm of the shower filled the ceiling as Brandon prepared himself for another day of manipulation. Margaret rose, the chair leg scraping against the floor. Her body trembled, but not with weakness. With resolve. Frank, her late husband, had always told her, predators count on silence. If you let them corner you, you're finished. But if you see them first, if you understand their pattern, you can strike back harder than they ever expect. Margaret straightened her robe, slipped her phone from the counter, and moved silently toward the stairs. Today would not belong to Brandon. Today, the rules shifted. The shower ran on. Brandon sang off-key. And Margaret Walsh, underestimated widow and supposed invalid, began to prepare her counterattack. By the time Brandon descended the staircase, his hair slicked back and his tie knotted with surgeon's precision, Margaret had already poured coffee into 2 cups. The morning light bled weakly through the curtains, casting the kitchen in a gray hush. "Morning," he said, voice warm enough to pass for casual but laced with that syrupy politeness she had grown to despise. He kissed Sarah on the cheek as she rushed past, still in scrubs, clutching a granola bar and her travel mug. "Another double," Sarah sighed. "Don't wait up." She leaned down, squeezed Margaret's shoulder with a tenderness that nearly undid her, then was gone, the screen door banging behind her. The kitchen quieted again, leaving only Brandon's presence heavy in the room. He sat across from Margaret, lifting his cup as though nothing in the world was out of place. "You're looking tired," he observed, his tone all mock concern. "Rough night?" Margaret forced a vague smile. "Some nights are better than others." He studied her, eyes sharp despite the mask of sympathy. "It happens at your age. Nothing to be ashamed of." He sipped his coffee, smug as ever, and slid a glossy brochure across the table. A cheerful cover photograph showed elderly people painting in a sunlit room. Sunset Manor. Her hand hovered above it, fingers trembling. She made sure he saw the tremor, though it was not fear that caused it. "They specialize in memory care," Brandon explained smoothly. "Round-the-clock supervision, structured activities. Safer for you. Easier for Sarah." Margaret turned a page, feigning confusion. "Physician referral required. Involuntary commitment provisions available." The words tightened like a noose around her throat, but she kept her face slack, her voice small. This looks expensive." Brandon waved a hand. "Insurance covers most of it. Sarah and I can handle the rest. What matters is your safety." "Safety." The word curdled in her ears. She imagined the phone calls he made when he thought she slept. She imagined Sarah, unknowingly caught between husband and mother, forced to watch the two halves of her life collide. Margaret set the brochure down gently. "If you and Sarah believe it's best, I suppose I'll adjust." The flash of triumph in his eyes was almost imperceptible, but she caught it. Predators always revealed themselves in the quietest moments. Brandon stood, brushing imaginary lint from his cuff. "Good. Rest for a while. You've got a big week ahead." As his footsteps faded upstairs, Margaret's jaw tightened. He thought she was pliant clay, ready to be molded into the helpless victim he needed. But the fracture lines he saw were not weakness. They were fault lines, and she was preparing for an earthquake. The house slept. Its timbers moaned with the weight of age, every creak magnified in the silence of the hour. Margaret lay on her back in the dark, eyes open, heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo off the plaster walls. She had trained herself to breathe evenly, to let her body mimic rest, but inside she was coiled like a spring. Then it came, the low murmur of Brandon's voice from downstairs. She slipped from bed, the carpet soft beneath her feet, and eased the door shut. Her nightgown brushed the banister as she descended, each step measured, careful, like a hunter tracking prey. The kitchen light glowed faintly under the doorframe, a slice of gold against the darkness. Margaret pressed herself flat to the wall, tilting her head just enough to catch his words. "She's positioned exactly where we need her," Brandon whispered into his phone. His tone was cool, deliberate, nothing like the polite veneer he wore for Sarah. "Confused enough that the paperwork won't be questioned, but lucid enough to sign when the time comes." Margaret's throat tightened. He paused to listen, then chuckled softly, a sound that scraped her nerves raw. "No, Sarah doesn't suspect a thing. She trusts me completely. Once the commitment is filed, I'll have power of attorney. The assets alone are worth more than $2 million. After that, well," his voice lowered, conspiratorial. "Facilities have accidents all the time. 6 months, maybe less. No one will ask questions." Her vision blurred. She clutched the wall to steady herself, the weight of the words sinking like lead. He wasn't just planning to discard her, he was plotting her erasure, neat and final. For a long moment, she thought she might collapse right there. But then something shifted. Rage burned through the fog of fear, clear and steady. She heard Frank's voice in her memory, calm and firm, "You don't panic when the trap closes. You study it. You find the weak hinge." She pulled back from the door, breath shallow, every nerve screaming at her to run. Instead, she crept upstairs, each step deliberate, controlled. Back in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed, fists clenched tight in her lap. She had less than 2 days. 48 hours before the hearing. 48 hours before Brandon sealed her fate. Margaret lifted her phone from the nightstand, thumb hovering over the contacts list. There was one man she trusted, one who had walked beside Frank through storms and shadows alike. If anyone would believe her, it would be him. She exhaled, steady and fierce, and pressed the number. The coffee shop smelled of burnt beans and rain-soaked coats. Margaret slid into a corner booth, her scarf pulled tight around her neck. She had chosen the seat with her back to the wall, where she could watch the door. Old habits from Frank. Ray Collins arrived 5 minutes late, his gray hair damp, his shoulders still carrying the posture of a detective even after retirement. He spotted her immediately, his face shifting from surprise to concern. "Maggie," he said, lowering himself across from her. "You look like hell. What's going on?" She didn't waste words. Her phone was already on the table, screen glowing with photographs of text messages and call logs she had captured from Brandon's carelessness. With hands that refused to tremble, she pushed it toward him. Ray scrolled silently. His jaw clenched tighter with every line. Package delivered, proper confusion within 72 hours. Commitment papers filed under emergency provisions. 6 months maximum timeline. When he finally looked up, his eyes had hardened into steel. "That bastard." Margaret nodded, her throat dry. He thinks I'm slipping. He thinks I'm defenseless. And Sarah, she believes every word. I need her to see the truth with her own eyes, Ray. If I go down, she goes down with me. For a long moment, he said nothing. The rain tapped the window, the hiss of espresso machines filling the silence. Then Ray leaned in, lowering his voice. We don't have the luxury of time. If that hearing happens, it's over. But if we move too early, we risk him spinning it as paranoia. He's slick. You know that. Margaret's nails dug into her palm. So what? I just sit and wait while he decides how to kill me. Ray shook his head. No. We bait him. Catch him on his own terms. You're going to play the role he expects, helpless, confused. Let him feel safe. And when he shows his hand, we'll be ready. Her chest tightened. It was one thing to overhear his plot, another to step willingly into the snare. But she thought of Sarah's trusting face, the way her daughter had brushed her shoulder with love even while being lied to. That love was worth the risk. Margaret inhaled slowly, steadying herself. If we do this, Ray, I want him caught so thoroughly there's no room for doubt. Not in court. Not in Sarah's heart. Ray gave a thin smile. Then let's set the stage. The rain outside quickened, rattling against the glass. Margaret felt the weight of the coming storm press in, but beneath it all was a sharp, glimmering clarity. She was no one's prey. The bathroom door rattled under Brandon's fists. Steam leaked from the cracks, curling into the hallway like smoke from a fire. Margaret, he barked. Open this damn door. She stood only a few feet away, her hand still resting on the key she'd turned. Her pulse hammered, but her eyes were steady. For weeks, she had worn the mask of frailty. Tonight, it slipped away. Detective Morrison's voice cut sharp through the air. Brandon Hayes, this is the Ohio State Police. We have evidence linking you to a conspiracy against your mother-in-law. Cooperate, and this ends easier for you. Silence. Then a laugh, short, brittle. This is absurd. She's delusional. You're being played by a senile woman. Margaret stepped closer, her voice calm, deliberate. I heard every word of your call Tuesday night. I saw your texts. The ones where you arranged the medication, the hearing, even my death. You underestimated me, Brandon. That was your mistake. A thud shook the door as he kicked it. Sarah, he roared. Sarah, come get your crazy mother before she ruins our lives. And then, footsteps on the stairs. Sarah appeared, still in her scrubs, her face pale and bewildered. Mom? What's happening? Ray placed a tablet in her hands. Read. The hallway fell into a silence so taut it felt like glass. Sarah scrolled, her lips moving as she read Brandon's words aloud. Package delivered, power of attorney, 6 months maximum. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled. And then, in a whisper that cut deeper than any scream, you poisoned her coffee. The bathroom went still. No excuses now, no charm. Only silence heavy enough to confirm the truth. Sarah's shoulders sagged. Her eyes filled with tears, but when she spoke again, her voice was sharp as broken glass. You called her a burden. My mother. The woman who gave us this home, who raised me, who kept us afloat when money was tight. A burden. The door rattled once more. Sarah, listen, no, her voice cracked, raw and trembling. I listened for years. I defended you. I believed you. And you used me as cover while you plotted to destroy the only person who ever truly loved me. Detective Morrison slid the key from Margaret's hand and unlocked the door. Brandon stood there in a towel, cornered, his face pale with panic. Sarah stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, with all the weight of betrayal behind it, "Get out of my life." The click of handcuffs echoed down the hallway, final and cold. The house was quieter than it had ever been. No humming from the bathroom, no syrupy voice dripping with false concern. Just the steady tick of the grandfather clock and the muted sobs of a daughter who had seen too much in a single night. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes were rimmed red, her scrubs wrinkled from long hours at work and now this unraveling of her life. Margaret placed a hand gently over hers. "I don't understand how I didn't see him," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "How could I sleep next to that monster and not know?" Margaret didn't rush to answer. She let the silence hold for a moment, then spoke with the steadiness of someone who had lived long enough to understand human blindness. "Because you loved him. And love makes us trust. That isn't weakness, Sarah. It's humanity. The weakness was his, not yours." Sarah looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I almost let him take you from me." "But you didn't," Margaret said firmly. "When the truth was put in your hands, you chose to see it. That choice saved us both." They sat together, mother and daughter, two women bound by betrayal yet stitched together tighter because of it. Weeks passed. The newspapers carried the story with the kind of breathless fascination only betrayal can inspire. Brandon Hayes, the ambitious husband who plotted to steal his mother-in-law's fortune and nearly her life. The trial moved quickly, the evidence impossible to deny. When the sentence was read, 30 years to life, Margaret felt no triumph, only a quiet release. Justice wasn't about victory. It was about survival. Sarah filed for divorce the very next morning. She came back to the old house with boxes of belongings and eyes still haunted but no longer naive. Margaret made coffee every morning, pouring it into 2 cups instead of 1, the air thick with unspoken gratitude that it was finally safe to drink. One evening, as the sun set in ribbons of gold over their small Ohio town, Sarah asked softly, "Do you think I'll ever be able to trust again?" Margaret looked at her daughter, saw the resilience in her posture, the raw courage it took to even ask. "You will," she said. "But first, you'll trust yourself. That's where it begins." Sarah leaned against her shoulder, silent. The porch creaked beneath their weight, the night air cool and forgiving. Margaret closed her eyes and let the moment settle. For the first time in months, she felt peace. Brandon had underestimated her. He had forgotten one truth that would outlast him in any prison cell. She was never helpless. And she was never alone.